and your views.
Good morning, Your Worship, staff, council. Thank you for having me. Pardon, I've got a million notes everywhere. They're not all my own. I get sent from everybody. Thank you for having me here. My name's Don Tucker. I live at 3006 Gateby Place. Where to start? I guess I'll start first off by saying that I understand that this is a difficult year. It's a difficult year, of course, for residents and for businesses alike. And obviously, you're going to make some difficult decisions. Within that, I just want to remind staff and council of our mission at this community is to deliver effective and efficient local government services that benefit our citizens, our businesses, our environment, and our future. And the first part of that is our citizens first. And I'd like you to keep that in mind when you're making decisions and when we talk about things, because sometimes it feels like, as residents, that we are last in that list and not first when it comes to decisions. I want to specifically bring that to mind when we talk about communication with residents. I'm still seeing a lot of complaints from residents when it comes to communication. Either a lack of response when it comes from communication from council and when it comes from staff. And there's only so much we can talk about when we talk about lack of staffing when it comes to things occurring, and that has been a theme that has come up time and again, but that shouldn't be an excuse. And I think sometimes there needs to be policy change around that. One of the suggestions I have specifically is with the planning department, and that because I know they receive a high call volume, and one of the things that came up in the last year or so was the fact that when they're busy, that calls and other things, especially from residents, are a low priority, and so should just sort of be shuffled off to the side. And my suggestion is that if you're going to do hiring in that department, you hire somebody to answer inquiries. You could hire an admin position to do that and actually get some of that call volume and those email responses dealt with. And therefore, projects can still get done, but residents are not shuffled off, just like you do with operations. It's also impacted things like the OCP. I don't know how many staff have changed on the OCP, but it's been multiple, and that causes continuity issues. We've seen that as well in pilot programs. I know we're still on pilot with dogs on Kin Beach and with Polson Park, and it's how many years now? That 1 year pilot? That's now like 3 or 4 or 5. What year are we at? Or have we forgotten about that again? Just saying. It might be nice to revisit that. I know the staff on both of those pilot projects have left, but it might be time to actually revisit some of the things that we start and actually look at them and see where they're at. I might be the only one that remembers these things, but hi, I'm here, and let's look at them. Okay. When we're talking about capital projects as well, we need to remember that residents live in these areas where these capital projects occur. And rather than just having them at budget times and in the budgets and then sending a letter out a couple of days, 30 days or so before they start, it might actually be nice to go and speak with the residents, because we know that these projects are happening a year, 2 years out or so on, and talk to the residents that these are going to affect a lot sooner before they start, and talk to the residents about the impacts of these projects. Sometimes residents have really good feedback that these projects are going to impact in negative ways. And I'm speaking specifically about things like when we were doing up at the Lakeview Park, and when we were doing on by Charlie's Market. And that, I mean, I know that after the projects had already started, that staff had to go and look at parking issues around those stores, and both of which affected these stores, by the way, to the fact that now these small businesses are closing. Which is a common theme in Vernon. I think we remember Baker's Dozen, and now we're losing 2 independent stores, which is, of course, disastrous for our community. And while we have to do projects, long delays in projects, I think, are something we need to consider as a problem in our community, and perhaps we need to look at contracting better and holding better standards to our contractors. Because if small businesses can't plan on dates being the dates, they're not able to hang on, especially when these contracts are happening during their busy season. And they're losing an entire season when they're just barely hanging on as is. And so ultimately, it's the tipping point that crushes them. And even residents, these contractors have problems and issues. They hit gas lines because they're dealing with old infrastructure that aren't marked. They hit water lines. And when these things flood, and the contractor's not from Vernon, they're from outside of here, and the residents can't get a hold of them, basements flood. And we had residents that ended up homeless because of some of these contractors this year, and they ended up having to leave the community because they couldn't find affordable rentals after that. These are impacts on our residents that are disastrous, whether it's a business or whether it's a resident themselves. And this is something that we as a community need to look at, and we need to be serious about it. And this is something that when we're looking at contractors, we need to understand that residents need to understand that there needs to be a process, that they need to be able to go after insurance. And we need to explain that to them, and we need to not stonewall them. We need to be able to help them, and looking and helping them prior to incidents happening and making sure that these things don't delay. Preloading is far easier than having these things affect them so disastrously that they can't come back. When we're talking about engagement, engagement is so important when it comes to the community, and I'm really happy to see that we are having both in-person and online engagement. However, engagement consistency would be nice. I understand that we have different contractors doing engagement. When we had the engagement on the repurposing for the rec center, and I did bring this already up with staff, but I want council to hear this, is it was held at Cal Tower Place, which was not a very pleasant place to have it in the rooms there. It was loud, and then it ended up being less of an open house, and it was almost like a presentation, and then it ended up being a small table thing. So people felt very uncomfortable when they ended up walking in thinking it was an open house when it was billed as that. And it was very weird. It was very strange to kind of have people come in. And then having that contrasted against the OCP engagement at the library, which was extremely well attended versus the other one. It was extremely vibrant, and so comparing those two contractors, you can tell the one that I felt much better. It was also, I think, more advertised. So just giving some thought to that. One of the things that perhaps can be answered by the planning department for me that I have a question about with the OCP is around the transit portion of the presentation. I noticed that there's 2 transit points that were presented in that, and on one slide, and yet at the OCP open house there were 4 transit points, and I noticed that was on the slide, and I'm wondering with the growth scenario, are we having 2 or 4? And I'm not sure if that's, what are we approving, 2 or 4 transit points in terms of our OCP growth? I think that's a bit confusing, and I don't know if that's something that can be clarified. I don't know if council if that's something that can be clarified with that.
Yeah, if you can focus on budget stuff, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's engagement consistency with the budget, and that because if we're going through the processes. Development cost charges, or DCCs. In 2020, we lowered them, and it doesn't seem like we can increase these costs fast enough to cover the actual costs of construction. So it ends up that residents are subsidizing this. and we can least afford it. Okay? What's our plan to actually recover costs for construction? How fast are we actually going to increase this? Because residents can't afford it. Most residents can barely eat at this point. Let's talk about sewer. Let's stop polluting. Okay? When irrigation is applied above septic, above the lake, okay, we're polluting an important water source. Sewer needs to be available in every Vernon neighborhood. And we need to encourage folks to hook up. It's cheaper in the long run if we offer incentives, because ultimately the more people on sewer, the more they're going to pay. And let's put it, the more environmentally friendly it is. Okay? Fees collected by our sewer utility continue to account for more than 10% of all revenues received by the city. Clearly, poop's a big moneymaker. Right? So why don't we get people hooked up? Why aren't we getting everybody hooked up to sewer in the Landing and everywhere else in Vernon? It doesn't have to be in tax increases this way. Let's incentivize sewer. Let's get people hooked up there. Irrigation rates, which we talked about already. We have not raised our irrigation rates since 2017. Our Greater Vernon water rates increase every single year. Our residential city sewer rates were increased by 3% every year over 5 years for a cumulative increase of 20%. Our city recently spent millions to repair the reclaimed water irrigation system. This cost was not borne solely by irrigation users, as per the Local Government Act. The irrigation fees the city charges need to reflect the actual cost of the city's irrigation business. It currently costs our city more than $1 million a year to provide irrigation water that generates less than $250,000 in revenues. How can these subsidies continue? Okay, no real business would run like this. Since tourism has changed and we got rid of our tourism building, there's been a loss of the public knowing what our education programs are. And one of the things that I'm not seeing is any kind of plan in our budget or otherwise for more education of our public. I know eventually our website is going to be updated for the city. When? I don't see that planned anytime soon. But one of the things is people need to know about certain programs. The more people are using city programs, especially around things like parking, the better it is. I know people are complaining constantly about our new app, especially seniors. If we want to encourage people to be shopping and utilizing downtown, we need to encourage people to use programs like the special parking permit for those with accessible parking. The city offers this program. You go and buy, every year they offer the new sticker you get, you put it on your accessible permit, put it up. You can park at any space. It doesn't just have to be an accessible space. Those can be saved for those with wheelchairs. And then every space is accessible and you can park for up to 3 hours without putting any money in the meter for the entire year, and it's prorated. Those are programs that should be advertised. We need plans for that. You know, our website is not easy to use. So on my Vernon and Area Community Forum, I get a lot of questions about the city because people can't search it easily. I think things like that should be a priority for the city. One of the other things that I notice as well is that as we move through the OCP process, you know, we're looking at affordable housing, and I really would like this city to look at what we consider affordable housing to be, because I know we have the Affordable Housing Reserve, which is currently around $527,475, okay? But I don't see any plan in the budget to add more into that reserve. I don't see the plan. That is important as we go forward. And I know it's partially defined in our housing action plan. It's quantitatively defined, some in the city spaces. But we really should get an idea of what that means, and are we going to put more into that? We seem to, every budget, have a whole lot of money in our uncommitted money that comes out. And I'm wondering if there's some policy around that as to exactly how that money is used. And in some way, maybe we should be looking to put money into that type of reserve, because obviously housing is huge for us right now. And affordable housing is something, as we go through the OCP, that we should be looking at. And so that's a suggestion I might plant for council to look at, keeping that reserve up so that we're putting money into that to continue to partner with nonprofits for affordable housing. I'm also going to revisit some of the things that I brought up last year, since they still need addressing. While it was received, I don't see any action on a lot of these. We've had wonderful weather lately. It's really unfortunate that we still have winter closures of our parks, particularly Lakeshore Park, where the gates are locked and inaccessible, which means people can't enjoy those parks. So once again, as I brought up last year, and it was noted to me, well, yes, well, we can revisit this when we revisit the budget for next year. Here we are, and no changes. And we're looking at recreational budgets. So it would be nice if people could still be enjoying at least the parking lots and be able to park at these parks to access some of these areas, especially when there is no plowing going on. It's not affecting our plowing budget currently. So again, I brought up paying the fair share for developers. I want to just remind, and I have mentioned to staff about saving the sculptures of the Ogopogo and the windmill when we are doing phase 2 coming up for Polson Park. And I do want to mention as well that looking at making sure before we redevelop Polson Park, which I noticed came up at the OCP open house, but we do need to do a full public engagement for redevelopment of Polson Park on its own after we solve the flooding issues, which when we do this redevelopment, this second phase of the creek, that's not necessarily solving the flooding issues of the park. That needs a whole other look. And again, the cultural center is about to break ground. This coming year, and I'm hoping that we're also going to take a look at the shortage of parking. We continue to take parking spaces away with the selling of the lot next to the Sueva mural, which I hope to come back to do a presentation in February to council over the Sueva mural and the murals in the city. We continue to take parking away, but I'm not seeing the additional parking spaces in our city, which is something that is always assured. And with the removal of the parking lot for the cultural center, we're losing more parking, and that's a huge concern for the residents. And once again, I touched on residential sewer rates rising, and we paid for the brewery's digester. And again, we want to look at who's required to pay for what, and we want to ensure that Coldstream's paying its share for its sewer services. And when we're talking about fire, again, I'm going to harp on the fact that we have an evacuation plan for the entire city. However, a plan is great, but it's only as good as the ability to execute it. And our citizenry does not know how to execute a plan that they don't know about. And to be able to execute it properly, we need to be able to practice it as a citywide thing. And that requires our public knowing the plan and to be able to do it, especially our downtown residents who are mostly seniors. And a lot of them don't have access to computers. They don't have the app. They don't have the knowledge. And we need to start, having block captains, and we need to start having building captains, and to practice drills and to get that knowledge and education out there. And maybe there's grants for that. And we need to do it before we end up like a lot of other cities where we may actually have to have an evacuation. It'll never happen. We've seen very large cities actually have this occur, and it's a potential. And it would be nice to know that these residents don't panic. I've seen that when we did go on alert the one time, and I had family members contacting me on my forum from Vancouver and elsewhere saying, I can't get a hold of my mom and she's in this building at this address. Can you find somebody for me to go and evacuate them if we go and evacuate? So this is a very real possibility, and I'm going to harp on this every time I come up here until we actually have something. Thank you very much. This is all I have for this morning. I'm sure I'll have more once we get into it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Don Tucker. Much appreciated.
Thank
you for bringing a number of concerns to us during this budget process.